Hey class, Dr. Cohen here. I'm here with a subject matter expert in the fields of religion and violence. And today, Dr. Jones is going to talk to us about the limits of war through the lens of moral limits. And he has a unique insight into violence and to war. He's going to provide us with this idea of a pastoral inquiry into the ethics of lethal force. So, Dr. Jones, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your background and what are we excited to learn about today?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cohen. It's a honor to be here with you today. I am currently a Navy chaplain in the reserves. I'm endorsed by the North American Mission Board. So I'm Southern Baptist in my background, but it's been an interesting journey. I actually didn't start as a chaplain. I started as a surface warfare officer. I graduated from the United States Naval Academy. I did that for several years, resigned my commission, and started over as a chaplain. And yeah, so it's been great. It's been crazy. It's been a wild ride, but here I am.
I can't wait to understand your perspective on violence and war. So let's kick it off. Tell us where we're going with this.
Yeah, and so, you had kind of put a call out, and this is something that's kind of it's been an interesting conversation. I As a chaplain, we have 100% confidentiality, and I'll have Marines or sailors in my office sometimes asking the deep, hard moral questions. Are we the good guys? What gives us the right? Maybe they've seen or done things. And when I first started as a chaplain back in 2005, we had a lot of people that were coming back from Afghanistan or Iraq or different places, and they had seen atrocities, and they
Mm.
were trying to figure out how to reconcile these with their own worldviews. And we saw the development of the idea of moral injury, perpetrator induced PTSD, PTSD itself. I mean, all of those things really started to come to light in a very different capacity. And that really kind of took me down a journey. But my journey had actually started nearly a decade prior when I was at the Naval Academy. Now, I'll get to that in a second. But the thing that makes this kind of fun is I always ask a commanding officer or leadership, or whenever I'm trying to have a fun conversation. I don't know if fun's really the right word for that.
Yeah.
Sorry. When I'm trying to have a deep conversation, that's it. With sailors and Marines, I'll ask the question, when's it okay to take a life? And it's interesting to see them struggle, because then I put the parameter that you can't use following orders or rules of engagement as your excuse. When
Right.
is it okay morally to take a life? And it's not a theoretical question. I think that if we don't wrestle with this prior to the moment of having to take a life, then that's what sets us up for failure later on down the road, because we can't
Right.
justify those things. And
And what do they
so,
tell you?
well, it's interesting. I in It's hard to believe I've been a chaplain for 2.5 decades, but in 2.5 decades, I have only had two people actually respond in an answer as to what I thought was good enough. And I realize that my view is a view, like, right, there are multiple views out there.
Yes.
Um, but but very rarely have they actually given. Usually they stutter, they stammer. We've been so programmed to back ourselves up by leadership, but sometimes leadership fails. Sometimes the institution, like, if we're not careful, it fails too. And that's why we have to understand our own obligation. And that comes back. I mean, I take it all the way back to our oath of office. My oath as an officer is not to obey the orders of those appointed over me. My oath is an Because that's not in my oath. Like,
Right.
right? My oath institution and the things that take place there. And so when we ask this question, when's it okay to take a life? We'll come back to that in a second. It goes actually back to plebe year of the Naval Academy when I was there. And I had this really cool, as part of the Semper Fi Club, because I wanted to be a Marine originally. And had this quote by John Stuart Mill, and it said that war is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things.
Right.
That's a really interesting way. That's actually what caught your attention on Facebook, I think, when we were talking about this. But he goes on to say that, the decayed and degraded moral state of patriotic feeling, which thinks that nothing is worth war, is much worse. And
Right.
he continues. He says, a man who has nothing for which he is willing to fight, nothing for which was more important than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature and has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men than himself.
Wow.
So it's not just a war's not the ugly thing. But if you're not willing to fight for something, the only reason you have the freedom to hold that stance or that belief is because someone else is willing to fight for freedom on your behalf. And that's something that, as a chaplain and standing alongside some of the men and women that we have the privilege to serve with, really becomes a major point of this. And so it kind of goes back to this idea. And I know that you're talking about just war. You're talking about probably some Clausewitz and kind of stuff. We've all read through some of those. And I think the big thing that I would take away from that is just wars isn't a permission slip. It's a breaking system. It's kind of like when we read in scripture, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Some people misinterpret that. They think that it's a way to exact revenge. And
Mm.
actually, if you look at the culture back when there was blood feuds, and it was like, I always give people the example of the Godfather. They kill one of ours, we kill six of theirs, kind of thing. And what God was saying was that's not allowed. Like in most people, I think in that time, the context would be heard as appropriate restitution, like the punishment fits the crime. And I know that's a little bit of I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that, but it's not a permission slip. It's a constraint to the system to allow us to maintain plausibility in a morality sense of it. And there's criteria that we see that take place between just cause and legitimate authority. And some people
Yeah,
might question what's legitimate authority. Oh, go ahead.
before you get too far,
Oh, yeah.
and we cover Lex Talionis in detail in the class, but is your view of just war universal across religions, meaning Islam, Buddhism with nonviolence, Christianity, Judaism, or is this a universal principle?
I think it should be. And I think I'm hesitant in saying that because our Christian worldview, or our worldview, Christian, Islamic, whatever the case may be, the worldview actually informs a base layer of how we even interpret the statement of even just war.
Right.
Like when you when you look at the criteria of just war, and you see this idea of a just cause,
Yeah.
your religious worldview is actually a precursor to what just cause might be.
Right.
Now, uh, I'm going to bring it back to something higher than that. I'm going to appeal to natural law here in just a moment, and
Okay.
that's actually takes it outside religion and culture and politics, which is kind of, I think, will be a fun discussion. But we've got this idea of legitimate authority, and so what we consider legitimate or not. I mean, if I'm a Christian and I believe the Bible is true, that becomes the ultimate authority in my world. I recognize that there are people out there that don't recognize the Bible as authoritative.
Right.
Okay. So can we come to a consensus of just war outside of that? And that's where I think, back to your question, that's where that kind of comes in. So we're going to come back to that in just a second. If you'll give me a slide or two, I think we'll have
Sounds good.
something good. But we know these half dozen things, and the line in the sand, really, we often distinguish. I think we should distinguish the difference between killing and murder. The Ten Commandments. I know you've probably covered this. It's not "Thou shalt not kill." The actual translation is "Thou shalt not murder," which means "Thou shalt not take a life without just cause." And so this idea of just, I mean, that's the KJV. That's the Kermit Jones version. So unauthorized, to be clear. But it's the difference between an active threat, which would be, you might have to kill someone, and not that you get to kill someone, it's you might have to kill someone, versus
Right.
murder. And this is where it really becomes key for us, because our rules of engagement state that if an enemy combatant, if he was shooting at me 30 seconds prior and I've incapacitated him, he's out of bullets, he's no longer like that type of a threat, I will actually risk my life and the life of my people. Like, I'll send my medic to save his butt or her butt, despite the fact it might be a trap.
Right.
They might have a grenade. There might be something else going on, an IED or something like that. And so, but we have said, we'll get to this in a moment too, that we're gonna try and save their life too.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that becomes unique in this. Now, I pull a lot of stuff from a gentleman by the name of Robert Humphrey. He's a platoon commander on Iwo Jima. He's
Mhm.
a Golden Gloves boxing champion, a Harvard Law School graduate. He was seeking out this idea of what is natural law, and what
Right.
is natural law from the standpoint of life and what drives us. And he developed what he called the dual life value. And it says that the only thing that we all have in common, and this is outside of culture, outside of religion, outside of politics, is that we value our life and we value the life of those we feel responsible for.
Right.
I take this to mean, and I see this, by the way, this is a universal value, because life is the only prerequisite to all other values. You can't have any other value if you're not alive.
It's
And
true.
so that becomes part of it. And so I interpret that as when scripture says that God's written his law in the hearts of every man, this is how I interpret that as far
Right.
as is taking this in. But I have yet to find a situation, and I've talked to people through suicide bombers. I've talked to people in probably a dozen different cultures in different languages with regard to this, and I have yet to find anyone that's able to refute it to any
Mm.
significant level. Even when they bring up things like a suicide bomber, which is a form of warfare that takes place. The suicide bomber doesn't wake up and say, "I love my life. I'm going to go kill myself." The suicide bomber wakes up and says, "I'm going to go do this thing for the sake of someone I feel responsible for, either my
Right.
God or my family or, whatever, and throw off the infidels," or whatever the statement may be. So this becomes a major point of understanding, I think, when it's okay to take a life, because we're gonna come back to Humphrey in a moment. And so we have to ask the question, where do rights come from? And this also comes back to, I think, to that presupposition that you mentioned. But you got state granted rights, granted by the government, and then you've got
Right.
natural law, which is this intrinsic to human existence. And when Marines or sailors come in and say, what gives us the right to be the world's police force, that's how they'll
Mm.
often say it. What gives us the right to be there,
Right.
and to impose our view on others? And my response is very simple: because we're the good guys. And well, what makes us the good guys? That should be the next question. Well, it's because
Right.
we're the first ones that have said all people have a right to life. All people are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and life, liberty, and property. Right? It's not that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Sorry, got my John mixed up a little bit with that one. But the idea is, it's not just Americans. It's not
Mm.
just left-handed dog catchers. It's not just people that are our allies. Every person has a right to live, and we should, as much as possible, support that right in any way that we can. Now, we have limited resources in certain things, but that's not really the conversation of whether or not we should
No.
be, pouring billions of dollars to other people. This is we talk about, like, preserving life and what it means. And so, by what right does America intervene? Well, we're not imperialist, as much as some people want to reclassify us as that, but we bring it from a protection standpoint of, we are protecting life. When you look at, why did we enter into to theaters of war, in almost every case, you can draw the justification back to, it's for the sake of national security, and that may or may not be a valid reason for some people. I get that, but that national security is to protect the lives of the people that we are responsible for. It's for the
Right.
people of the citizens of our country, and we will also protect the citizens of other people's countries as much as we can, in the pursuit of amazing things. And so that becomes a new frame, is not this frame of imperialism, but rather a frame of protection. Now, does that mean that we should needlessly go into places? And the answer is absolutely not. That's why we don't go in and just, we went to World War One, we withdrew. We went to World War Two, we mostly withdrew. We stayed for the protection of we stayed for the purpose of protection, but we've never laid claim to land. We've never had that imperialistic dominance of things that have taken place. So the problem that then becomes is this danger of inconsistency when we become hypocrites, or the danger of becoming a hypocrite. And we have to have a consistent moral coherence in the things that we do. We've got to make sure that whenever we go do something, we can always tie it back to this idea of, we're protecting our life, or we're protecting those we're responsible for, those tenets of things that come in. Which brings us back to this question:
Right.
when's it okay to take a life? Well, I've had one commanding officer and one non-CO answer the question, and this CO was one that I had some really phenomenal, deep conversations with, and he kind of nailed it. The only time I would say that it's okay to take another life is in the defense of other lives, and that's only if every other means has failed, and only with the idea of moral restraint. We take only the amount of life that's necessary. And I talk to people sometimes, and I'm a chaplain, so people expect me to be all happy, and I love to do the chaplain thing of play guitar and drink coffee and talk about whatever. but people ask the questions, well, would you kill someone? No, as a chaplain, I'm a non-combatant. So the answer is, in my official role as a chaplain, absolutely not. Like, I want to be very clear on that. But if you break into my home and you threaten my children, like, right. And people go, oh, I don't think I could ever kill someone. And so I always paint a picture. I say, look, you come into the room, there's someone with a knife that's getting ready to kill someone that you love, a child, your grandmother, your significant other, whoever the case may be is, and you have a gun. And the only way to save their life is to kill the other person. What would you do?
Mm.
And the reality is we may not take someone's life for protecting our own life. Because Humphrey's value is that life is the universal value, right? But it's a dual value, it's self and others. We will often do for others something we would never do for ourselves.
Ourselves, yeah.
And that becomes really key in this one. So if it's necessary, now the next thing is if it's not necessary, then that becomes a different conversation. But in the stance of war, if it's necessary and it's in the protection of other life, and we've exhausted all other means, and we know that there's a moral constraint, then it's okay to take a life. Um, that's not willy nilly. That's not me making a decision. Now we codify that in ROE. We codify that in instructions in the way that we go to war. But the reality is that's the ultimate like moral thing. And so I would make the statement that war is ugly, but moral indifference to evil is uglier.
Mm.
When you
Powerful.
are unwilling to take the stance against evil, and so we could extend the conversation. Well, I think you're going to come later in the course of the idea of rapists and murderers and that kind of stuff, and capital punishment then comes into play. That's a different type of war, I would say.
Mm.
That's a war of morality of things that are taking place, and we have to be careful when we engage in those. But the reality is that evil uh, has to be fought. Evil has to be. I would say I don't want to use the word snuffed out, but that's the word that comes to mind. We need to seek it out. We are called to defend the helpless. We are called to defend the weak. We are called to protect those who are unable to protect themselves. And so that becomes, I think, very key. And it's a different type of war. Maybe it doesn't come into this part of the conversation, but a moral indifference to evil, I think, is far worse than war itself,
Mm.
because we see the ramifications of things that take place with that. And
Powerful stuff.
yeah,
So, is there a universal morality, in your opinion, that goes across religion? Um, and if so, is this the natural law that our forefounders had, or what is this universal morality if it exists?
yeah, I think that universal morality comes back to Humphrey, and that's Humphrey when he developed the dual life value. He has a book called Values for New Millennium. He was seeking, and this is in the 50s and 60s, he was seeking like what is natural law? Like what is this universal law that exists outside of religion, culture, and politics? And what he came back to was it's the law of, or the universal value of life.
Right.
That the dual life value is the precursor to whether or, and this is where it really gets interesting. And I know this isn't necessarily the topic, but it actually becomes the determinant of are other values moral or immoral from a human perspective. For instance, if I say that, I'll ask people, I'll ask them to raise their hands. I'll do a show of hands. I'll say a show of hands. Who thinks that truth is universal value?
Hmm.
And inevitably, a bunch of people raise their hand. Like, right, they value truth. Well, do you? Because if I come to you and say, "Tell me where your loved ones are," I'm going to go kill them, or I'm going to kill you. The reality is that truth is a secondary value to the ultimate life value, which is protection of your loved ones.
Right.
And life isn't the universal value in that alone, because you would sacrifice your own life for your loved ones. We also see this from the standpoint of, I have a fun exercise where I tell people, I say, if a ship is sinking, and I have a slide that has two words on it. I don't have the words up. I'll say if a ship's sinking and people say
Mm.
every person for themselves, man or woman for themselves, and they live and they make it to the island, what do we call them? And what do you think
Right.
people say? Like, they live and make it to the island, what do we call them?
Survivors?
We call them survivors, like, right? And if they die in the process of saving others, they say women and children first. They die in the process of saving others. What do we call them?
Heroes? Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
hey.
and so the reality and so I have that I built that slide deck 2 decades ago. There's this innate property. That doesn't matter the religion. I've asked that to Buddhists, to Muslims, to Jewish, to Christians, to Rastafarians. I've asked it a bunch. It's the same
Hmm.
answer every single time. Like it is innate that we have this innate understanding of this value of life that's outside of our religious worldview. And so I think that that then becomes uh, a common ground of
Hmm.
respect that even if you and I have a drastically different worldview, even if we don't have the same authority of what maybe is just war, we can still come back to the fact that I know that you were doing what you were doing for the same reason I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing
Right.
what I'm doing because I think it's in the best interest of myself and the people that I feel responsible for, and so are you. And I don't have to like you. The reality is I might have to kill you, like, at some
Hmm.
point, like, right? I acknowledge that. But we at least have a common point that we can start with. And that's where Humphrey's work was phenomenal in that regard. I would highly recommend as far as a read, Values for Millennium, great discussion in that arena.
Final question to leave us today, and don't feel free to go as deep into this concept as you want or not. Is there absolute pacifism for the American, or do we have to have some sort of nonviolence form of pacifism? I.e., is there such thing as absolute pacifism, especially in the
Mm,
American context?
wow, that's a good one. Um,
Like, uh, do you, Dr. Jones, subscribe to a absolute view of pacifism as a military chaplain?
by fact of that, I'm in the military. uh, I I think that the only time, and I'm gonna draw from my faith on this one.
Yes.
The only time that absolute pacifism would actually work would be in the Garden of Eden before sin entered the world. Like like absolutely. Like, yeah, that would have been ideal. But we live in a world where, we talk about how there's sheeps and there's wolves. Well, there's also sheepdogs, like, right?
Mhm.
And the protectors of the flock. But uh, I think the problem that a lot of Americans have, well, I should be really careful how I say this. Um, one of the challenges of living in a highly developed nation like America, maybe I'll word it like that, is that we don't really understand. Like, we understand struggle, but we understand struggle at a very different level than what 90% of the world understands struggle as.
Right.
We're not struggling to exist. We're struggling because, we don't have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Uh, and so when you struggle because you don't have Wi-Fi, you become very detached and very insulated from the reality. I've had conversations with people. Uh, I, I'll give an illustration. Um, and if I get off tangent, you let me know. But this is an example. This is something that happened in the early 2000s. The stage is Marines. They land. They're in a in country overseas in the sandbox. They're in a Humvee. Uh, a little kid shows up. He's reaching through. He's trying to grab one of the Marines' sidearms and actually gets hold of the sidearm, like gets it dislodged, grabs
Mm.
the gun, is pulling it out, and the other Marine on the other side of the vehicle shoots the kid. As the kid falls out, now tragic loss of life, like, right. But as the
Mm.
kid falls out of the vehicle, he grasps a pair of sunglasses and falls to the ground. Now there are multiple witnesses. He had hold of a gun. He was a bigger threat than sunglasses. But the headlines were Marines killed this young kid, like
Mm.
12-year-old kid, over a pair of sunglasses. Well, fast forward about 6 months, the Marines leave the country, the Army comes in and takes over, and this is back when Marines were the only ones wearing tan boots.
Yeah.
Um, when the Army took over the block, the AOR, insurgents started to come back, like a lot of insurgents, a lot of resistance of things that were taking place. And they were like, man, and we make this joke, well, the Army can't secure the location. So the Marines show back up. And the day the Marines came back into the AOR, all the insurgency stopped.
Wow.
And everybody was like, what in the world is going on? Like there was no American explanation for this taking place, because it wasn't like the Marines came in heavy handed. They literally just showed up, boots on ground. And somebody eventually, through one of the interpreters, managed to have this conversation, and they asked somebody. They said, why was there's this time period of like a couple of months of insurgency, and when the Marines came back, and they're like, oh, because they're the tan boots, and they'll kill you over a pair of sunglasses.
Wow.
And the idea is, the lesson learned is that even though we don't think might makes right, we believe that there's a morality to what makes things right or not. That is not true in a lot of parts of the world. In a
Right.
lot of parts of the world, strength is the only thing that is recognized. It's the only thing that's respected, and it's the only thing that allows you to enact order. Now, that may not be the best way things are, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of places in the world that don't believe like we believe. And the irony is that we have people in America that want to be pacifists because they think, oh, if we were just all pacifists, like everyone would love us. No, there are a lot of people in the world that if you are a pacifist, they will kill you.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting when people are defending certain groups of people that they would not themselves be welcomed by that group of people. Now, that's the ultimate view of tolerance. Like, tolerance is not accepting someone's right, is not accepting someone's belief as true. It's accepting the right to believe something you think is wrong. But at the end of the day, I find, but I don't think they're doing it out of this genuine heart. They're doing it out of ignorance. And the
Mm.
problem with complete pacifism, I think, as you're describing, is that that can only exist with an indifference to evil.
Mm.
Like, right? It can only exist in a self aggrandized bubble where I'm just going to live in my bubble, and I'm going to do what's comfortable for me, and I'm going to be pacifist because it's about me. And anytime someone's belief is focused on them and them alone, and not the people that they're supposed to be responsible for,
Right.
that's where the morality fails with regard to pacifism. Um, If I wanna make a choice to be a pacifist myself, I get that. But if I'm not willing to stand up for the person beside me, and the children, and the innocence, and the good that exists in the world, I believe that that's actually worse than the atrocities, that are being committed by the evil people in some regards.
Right.
Um, I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question fully, but I think we have to be careful with pacifism, because pacifism is a luxury that a lot of Americans have that does not exist in 99 or 95% of the world.
Right.
And if we don't acknowledge that, we're kidding ourselves, for lack of a better way to putting it.
I really appreciate this time, Dr. Jones, and just your expertise and your wisdom and your deep lived experiences as a military chaplain and as an academic. Any last places people, if do you have a social media presence or anything like that? Or
No, I mean, I do coaching at kermitjones.com. But I'm available if anybody ever wants to connect. I'd be happy to answer any questions or carry on a conversation at a later time.
all right. Well, thank you, Dr. Jones, and I appreciate your time today. It is the most appreciated of all things, time with you.
Thank you, and blessings to you.